In this episode, I get to explore the world of ADHD at a foundational level, something that I've never really dug into before. But Chris does such a great job of explaining how the mind works and how the environment can shape how we see things, and how those different operating systems can mean that we're potentially sitting in the wrong type of environment. Now, for me, knowing more about yourself and understanding who you are and how you are makes this world a lot easier to navigate. So I hope you enjoy this conversation. We go all over the place. We talk about hypnotherapy, therapy itself, trauma, and ADHD. So I hope you enjoy it. I got so much out of this, and enjoy. So welcome back to Vantage Point Conversations. I'm your host, Colin Parsons. I basically I don't really call it an interview. I believe it's just a conversation. There's no grilling of questions. It's just a genuine exchange of things that I'm curious about, things that I know nothing about. And I come across so many amazing people that I would have never come across in my old corporate job. So my guest today, you've put Christopher Marsh, but I know you as Chris Marsh. So what do you prefer?
I prefer Chris. It auto-completed that. I thought I'd leave that.
Okay, nice. Okay, Chris, so opening monologue is always the same. People could just cut the first few minutes, but I never introduce my guest. Not being lazy, I just think that I would do a very bad job of it. So take as long as you want, little as time as you want, just to explain who you are, any highlights, lowlights, anything in between, and then we just jump into the conversation from there.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. So I am Chris Marsh. So I am an analytical hypnotherapist and shamanic healer. That is my vocation. So essentially, I help people let go of all of the subconscious blocks, fears, negative beliefs that hold them back in any area of their life, to help them find their purpose, their passion, their joy in life, essentially. So like Colin, I come from a corporate background originally. I retrained now 6 years ago to become a therapist. So I used to work in the IT software industry. Hello to anybody from my old career who might be watching. And through basically a lifelong passion of helping people, but also 10 years of trying to resolve my own mental health issues, got me on this path. So even early on in trying to resolve my own mental health issues, I started to get a passion for wanting to get into mental health in some way to help others. And ultimately that journey led me to hypnotherapy. Alongside of that, then there was a spiritual awakening as well, that led to the shamanic healing practitioner. But mostly day-to-day analytical hypnotherapy is my focus. But I'm now moving into teaching as well. So my mentor is getting to the ripe old age of 64. So I'm looking to take over the association from him. So working with him at the moment just to modernise the association. And the way I train, I don't only help people learn this therapy process. I put them through the therapy to resolve the blocks that might hold them back running their own business. But I also provide business coaching and mentorship as well, because the easy bit is actually learning a modality. The hard bit is running a business and learning how to find people and sell in the right way. So that's me.
Fantastic. There's so many parts that I want to touch on there. I think I've been on a bit of a learning journey myself. So I've said many times, and I openly talk about this, about going to therapy, and I think there was a stigma attached to it, going to therapy. So I oftentimes it's related to, okay, especially as a man, I'm not discounting women from that, but I believe men really struggle to sort of admit that there's something going on for them. There's a bravado or some sort of masculinity or something.
Yeah.
And when I went to therapy, at first I thought it's because I couldn't handle the world or what was going on around me. And I felt quite weak about myself in that way. But I think that's an outside conditioning. No one actually tells you that you shouldn't do it, but I think it's just you get it from society. People aren't talking about it. And so that you kind of inherit that, right?
100%. So it's the social conditioning, really. Like, I mean, for example, that whole keep calm, carry on nonsense, the most toxic thing that's happened in our society in recent years. Don't keep calm, don't carry on, stop and get some help. But it goes back to childhood. So we call this ancestral trauma. Like we're inheriting the belief systems of our parents. We're also growing up in their nervous systems. We're affected by their stress, their anxiety. Now, if you think about when you learn to ride a bike, right? You fall off. The first thing your parents say is brush stuff off, stop crying, get on it, and go again. So these are the types of experiences that create this mindset of we've just got to keep going, just got to keep going. And like you said, for guys in particular, that's really amplified, that we've got to be the providers, we've got to be the tough guy, we've got to be the protectors. So we've got to just keep going. We're not allowed to take a step back. We're not allowed to struggle with things. And I live in Yorkshire, grew up in Yorkshire, so it's pretty much the same for women in Yorkshire as well. Okay. And essentially, this just gets kind of amplified as we get older. All these different experiences just put more and more weight on this. We get to teenage years. The social conditioning in the school environment amplifies this. We go into the big wide world again. We're meant to feel as guys we should be the providers, and we go into whatever our chosen career is. And again, we've just got to keep going. We've just got to keep pushing. We're not allowed to take a step back. We're not allowed to stop. We're made to feel like it's weak to stop, weak to quit, weak to make changes. And it's just that persistent conditioning that just builds and builds and builds. Unfortunately, I was the same. Most people just get to a breaking point where something really, serious or big happens, where you go, shit, this is getting pretty bad now. I need to try and do something about this. So part of what I like to do in, conversations like this, or, when I talk at events, is to actually normalize that, it's okay to talk about what you're struggling with. It's okay to be emotional. See, these guys, real strength comes from actually allowing yourself to be vulnerable in reality. So it is really important to, go and get that help. And there's some really awful statistics that you might be aware of around guys and suicide, particularly in the 40 to 50 age group. And that is for that very reason, that we're just conditioned to keep going.
Yeah. And I think having all of that bottled up, not even being able to share about it. And I've said this before, I've got some great mates, but if I said, I've got a problem, the answer was, let's just go and have a pint, go and have a drink. And that is basically just putting a Band-Aid on something, and you have a drink, and then you kind of, you don't actually talk about it, and you end up going the other way, and it's like, oh yeah, no, life is fine. But for me, I it's not that I love beating the drum of therapy, and there's so many different ways of helping yourself, asking other people to help, etc. So I don't, and I feel that maybe the word therapy, there needs to be an alternative word for therapy, because I think it comes with so much legacy, sort of thoughts or assumptions, etc. And I think if there was something,
100%, I mean, we associate it with what we see in popular culture, so in TV, films. Obviously, therapists are always presented in a very particular way, right? And of course, in the UK, we'll usually connect it with our GP and the doctors and the consultants we see in the NHS. And in the mainstream, you're always talking to somebody who's sat behind a desk. There's always, this hierarchy that's provided. In mainstream mental health, there's a lot of sitting behind the academic and knowledge is power kind of rhetoric. But I turn up as I turn up. This is my uniform. I am the classic middle-aged man wearing super dry hoodies. I'm aware of this, but they're very comfortable. So I turn up in jeans and shorts. And I work with a lot of teenagers, but how can a teenager relate to a guy in the middle age who sat there in a suit? Very vicious. In therapy, it's all about understanding people, understanding what is going on for them, what they're experiencing. It's creating safety, because you've got people coming to you who basically need to be in a very vulnerable position, very vulnerable to allow yourself to open up and talk about all the things that you struggle with. And for a lot of people, it comes with shame, it comes with guilt, it comes from other feelings that they really struggle with. So you've got to create safety by building rapport to allow trust to be given. So I used to think trust is earned. It's not. It's given. It can be taken back very easily as well. I mean, I had a client come to me who'd been to see some other therapists, and she'd been to see another hypnotherapist actually, who was female and middle age. And the key issue this young lady struggled with was self-image. Now, to you and I, she was slim, pretty, young. Do you think, well, why do you feel like this? But it's a subconscious belief system. So in part, it was inherited from her mum. Her mum had massive self-image issues, and some other things that happened to her just amplified that. And she said, as she was explaining this to this other therapist, she sat back and folded her arms. So obviously triggered her belief system. And my client then said, yeah, after that, I don't even tell her about the cannabis addiction. I'm like, I bet you're dead. Again, the trust was taken away in that moment, because it's about creating safety. So, and again, the trouble with NHS, so I used to work in healthcare software. So, most of the consultants in the NHS, most of the nurses, most of the people you see, they want to do a good job, but they can't because the system doesn't allow it. They're not allowed. They haven't got enough time. They haven't got enough budget. Their only tools really are medication and talking therapies. If you're lucky, you might get CBT or EMDR, but again, they will barely scratch the surface. So you're just left feeling like nobody cares. You're left just feeling kind of brushed aside. And for me, even in my 20s, in my early IT career, I started to think if I had my choice again, I probably wouldn't go into IT. I'll probably go into psychotherapy or psychology or something like that. But I'd already commit myself by then. It's another conversation. But in reality, I couldn't have done what I do now at that point because I've not experienced all of my mental health issues by then. I've not gone through all of my darkness and really kind of dark thought process and experiences, because that's what enables me to understand and have empathy with the people I work with. So a lot of people come to me who've got way more extreme things than I've ever experienced, but I've experienced enough to know how they can get to that level and what they're feeling and experiencing. But the mainstream mental health, you're dealing with a lot of young people often that have learned from textbooks and they're very knowledgeable, but they just can't understand how you feel, and you turn up and you have the conversations and you ask you how you're feeling. You fill in what's called an ARCADS form, which is, how depressed I feel, how suicidal I feel, how anxious I feel. But in that moment, you might be all right. But in the middle of the night, when you woke up with a panic attack thinking like the world was going to end, you certainly were not. And so there's a massive shift needed on that side, but it's going to be very slow for it to change. And this is why people like me have a career. Because we are able to spend the time with people. We are able to give them plenty of time to explain and talk about what they're struggling with, and I have the right tools to be able to resolve their issues permanently. And that's the real difference.
I think so. I remember this saying, "Why would you take financial advice from someone who is in debt?" And it's the same as therapy and all of these things. I know there's people out there that would study, etc., and I'm not trying to discount them.
Yeah.
But once you've been through something yourself, it shows you into a world that you would have never have seen before, and you can't understand it from reading a textbook. You can't do it by just 100%. Doing the reps. I don't believe, and so oftentimes it's really, for me, it's really important to connect with. Well, it is ultimately the most important thing to connect with whoever you're talking to and to understand them. And oftentimes we get referred to certain people, and I've come across people that have gone through therapy and they go, "Oh, well, I've explained everything to this person, but I don't really like them, but I can't be bothered to go and explain it to someone else." And I'm like, even if it's like 4 different people, or different modalities in terms of therapy, etc., I would encourage anyone to go and find the right person for them. And yeah, that might take a few sessions to understand, etc.
Yeah,
But
100%. Yeah.
don't, and yes, it's horrible to explain your whole life story if you don't. But I also think there is, you mentioned talk therapy. There is some benefit for me about just talking about something, just getting it out. And so
100%.
So saying that it's actually even better when you do tell. I know it can be uncomfortable to tell people, but if you don't resonate or that person doesn't get you, don't think that you have to stay with that person, and you can find other
absolutely.
people. So.
Again, trust and rapport is vital between client and therapist. Otherwise, it won't work. And I mean, I offer free consultations for what I do for that reason. It's like, my job as a therapist in that context is I got to demonstrate the value of what I do, show evidence that I can resolve their issues. And then it's ultimately up to then the client to feel like, I resonate with Chris. I gel with him. I feel safe with him. And so, clients don't go ahead. That's fine. I'm just not the right fit for them. And some therapists do not offer consultations, go straight into paid sessions. Again, that's okay. But again, you need the ability to work out, am I the right fit for this person? And talking about talking therapies, so, talking therapy is a great start point. Just understand yourself, understand mental health and the concepts and the science and the physiology of it. But, for any kind of therapy, if you get stuck in therapy for too long, then it keeps you stuck in the trauma because you're constantly just reliving it, talking about it. People get stuck in talking therapy, psychotherapy for years and never get out of it. And this is the same, I believe, for support groups like AA, recovery groups for drug users. They're all good to start with, but you just get stuck with other people in their own issues, talking about all your own issues constantly. You need a way to get out of that. You need to surround yourself with the right people who are going to push forward and pull you up with them, not drag you down to their level. So, talking therapy is a great start point, but why I started hypnotherapy and why I use the process I do is because I believe that you can't let go of this stuff consciously, because usually we can't see the connections between what we're experiencing now and where it started. So usually most of the things that create the negative beliefs and the fears that hold us back start in childhood. And our mind's very vulnerable when the conscious mind's not developed enough to rationalize, reason, process, and protect, particularly in those first 7 years. We soak up everything like a sponge. So we're soaking up our parents' anxieties, their fears, their belief systems. And the kind of small experiences that create this stuff often will create the same kind of reactions and triggers as the things we associate with trauma as an adult. So, most of the things will go back to usually early experiences. It could be, some bullying at school, it could be too much negative reinforcement from parents. It could be parents' own issues and traumas. It could be illnesses, injuries, these kind of things. Because once a fear is created, it's never cancelled. Every time fear is then triggered, it gets pushed into strength a little bit. Then we might go through some really big experience that can catapult those fears forward very quickly, like pouring petrol on the fire almost. COVID's a great example of that. Anybody who had any kind of health anxiety before then might have just been bubbling under the surface. Maybe they were when they're younger, maybe a grandparent died young, or their parent was ill or died when they were younger. And suddenly coming out of that first lockdown, I was getting loads of people who were struggling with panic attacks. I had no idea why. Couldn't see the connections consciously. They couldn't understand and rationalize it. But it was connected to those early experiences that created the start point of health anxiety that just got amplified very quickly with COVID. So, analytical hypnotherapy is all about finding those trigger points, finding the start point to allow the subconscious really to recognize, right, that fear served me a purpose at 5 years old, 8 years old, 10, 15, 20 years old. Doesn't serve me a purpose anymore. It's safe to let that protective program go. So we all essentially suffer an element of PTSD to some degree. And that is all PTSD is. It's just the fears have been elevated to such a high level that obviously, guys and girls within the forces are just suffering extreme reactions. In those war zones, you've got to be hyper vigilant because there's a good chance you get seriously injured or even killed. So fears are escalated to the highest level. But because they never come back down in strength, they never go away, come back to, the hometown, walking down the street, hear something, see something, smell something, triggers that fear, and they're all the way back to that same point in the war zone.
Yeah. It's I think in terms of trauma, I had this conversation a little while ago, and it was actually a gentleman called Ryan Harland, and he'd suffered child abuse, and so often when we talk about trauma and things like that, and we think about things in our childhood, and I said this statement. I said I suffered some bullying. I said it's not on the same level as obviously he'd been through. He obviously didn't go into too much detail. And he stopped me immediately, really in such a kind way. And he said, like, whatever you're going through, that's fine. It's not a comparable thing, how we process things, how we see it.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's all relative, you see. So, my 10 out of 10 anxiety might be a 1 out of 10 anxiety. Doesn't mean that I'm not suffering. My level of anxiety doesn't mean it's not creating a massive impact in my life. But, everybody that comes into my office will sit in the chair and go, well, there's people worse off than me. Well, there always is. I mean, some people, not many, but, even then, even the extremity of things, there's always somebody. But it doesn't mean you don't deserve the help. It doesn't mean you don't deserve to let go of these fears to allow you to really find fulfillment in life and find that happiness.
Yeah. And I'm fascinated by this subconscious mind and how it works, because like you've just described, it's something that happened maybe in our childhood that, I consider myself a logical thinker. I don't, I'm not genius level or anything like that, but I tend to understand myself, especially, having gone through therapy and trying to understand a lot of these things. But there are things that just are like blind spots to us. And, for me, it's just a way to actually go and find those weeds. You can't even see those weeds yourself. You have to find someone to go in, because often in the way that, for me, the conscious mind is like in front of that, and it's always trying to, especially for me, it's trying to rationalize a lot of things.
Yeah, rationalize, reason, protect, push away, put things in the cupboard.
So when things don't add up, like I find that very hard to deal with, and it's like, oh, okay, this isn't something I can just quickly look at, and then you go, right. And it's so in terms of hypnosis, I've had a conversation about hypnosis before on these lives, and the problem was when we were growing up, we're probably similar sort of age, and there was on Saturday night TV to find a like hypnosis. It wasn't a hypnotherapist. It was just it was like a stage performance of making someone cluck like a chicken or bark like a dog. And you go, oh, okay. And so I think people overlook hypnotherapy because of maybe some assumptions,
some stigma associated with it. 100%. I mean, I'm 50, so I used to watch a lot of Bugs Bunny as a kid. It was the same thing, whether using the watches and his eyes are spinning around, but that isn't really what it's about at all. So ostensibly you can't conflict with somebody's beliefs and behaviors with hypnosis. Now, if you look into the MK Ultra experiments in the 60s, 50s, 60s, that's different. That's persistent ways of trying to control mind. But when you look at stage hypnosis, everybody that gets on stage volunteers. The hypnotist chooses the most susceptible people from the audience to do this trick where you can't get your hands apart. And then because everybody volunteers, the centre president's going to do everything it has to do. My sister's always first volunteer, she's a massive exhibitionist, always has been. But they very quickly shuffle people off the stage that aren't playing the game. So therapeutically, I use a light hypnosis. So, in terms of the brainwave patterns, beta is like our conscious thinking state. So that's the little voice inside. Alpha is the meditative state, the hypnotic state. That's the state we get to when like artists and sport professionals talk about being in flow. We go through that brainwave pattern every time we wake up and go to sleep. because in the process I use, we want you to remember the things that come up. We're working consciously and subconsciously. If you go into what calls subumbilistic state, the trance state, it's like you're in that moment where you wake up from a dream and you kind of lose it very quickly. I mean, that has its place, for some work. But to find and release root causes, we need the subconscious to let go of it. We also need the conscious mind to know that you've let go of it as well. But it's just a deep state of relaxation in the context of how I work and most hypnotists work. It just quietens the conscious mind that's always rationalizing, reasoning, analyzing, trying to make sense of things, trying to protect. It's the conscious mind that blocks things out. The subconscious is like CCTV. It records everything that's ever happened to us. It's all in there. We just need to put your body in the right state and ask it the right questions to surface up what we need. The subconscious has a unique ability to know exactly what you need to see to let go of. It's very powerful in that way. So you get what you need, not always what you want, but you get what you need. And that's why I use hypnosis as a vehicle for therapy. It enables to bypass that conscious mind that's sitting as a protective layer, if you like, on top of our traumas, to allow the subconscious to surface up these past experiences that in those are connected to the things that we struggle with. So, most people will come to see me based on the testimonials I get, the outcomes that they see. And the things that people write are just incredible. It really does amaze me even now after 6 years. But most people don't even know what hypnosis is still, might know somebody who's quit smoking with it or heard of it. And a lot of people come to see me will say, I'll try anything now. I've tried everything else I can get through the NHS. I've tried loads of talking therapies. I just need to get rid of this. Get me what you did for that person. And often halfway through the process, they'll go, what are we doing again? Am I doing it right? Is it working? And the answer is always yes. But, people buy outcomes, not modalities. This is what I focus on my business coaching side of what I do. But I do have to cut through the trepidation a little bit with hypnosis. So I always do taster sessions in my consultations just so people can try it and see what it feels like. It puts your body into a similar state as deep sleep. So it starts a physical restorative process as well. But the second most rewarding thing in my job, after getting the results, of course, is when people first experience it and they have that kind of like wow moment, and particularly people who are struggling a lot with anxiety, people who are ADHD and autistic in particular, have generally never experienced that level of relaxation before, or not for a long time. And that's usually the thing that convinces them that this is the right thing for me.
There's a number of questions that the topic today was really about ADHD, but so how does that work then? Because I know nothing about ADHD other than that it sort of pops up. So like, what is it? What isn't it? I think maybe more importantly. And so why I say this is because I know nothing about it, but I also think there's a lot of misconceptions about it. Mm-hmm. I'm not the biggest fan of labels, and I will tell you this because when I was a kid, I went to the doctors and they told me I had some very thin tubes, like my airways and breathing tubes were quite thin. So I had to take like this equivalent of like an asthma pump. So I remember doing a running race at a school sports day. So I was small, I'm 7-ish, and I thought I was going to win it. I thought, I was going to, and then I didn't. I was doing well, and then everyone overtook me, and I came in not last, maybe last. But then my mum said, "Oh well, of course you wouldn't win because your airways are not that way." But the problem with me was that because of my mum had said that, and I know she was trying to be supportive in a way. I basically took that for a huge amount of my time, and that was the label that I just said to myself, and it created this limiting.
You accepted that limiting belief in that moment.
Yeah, and so I do feel that there is this. We do like to stick a label on stuff, and put people into boxes, and that works for me sometimes, but also it limits us. And I think we can then, in my case, I came up with a ton of excuses not to do something.
Yeah.
However, I am perfectly fine. I'm more healthy and fit now than I've ever been in my whole life. And I'm like, oh, okay. And so, so sorry, just to give some sort of context. So, do you want to just dive into that?
So ADHD is not a disorder. A lot of people will disagree with that, particularly mainstream psychologists and psychotherapists. But it isn't a disorder. It's just a different physiology. It's a different operating system, right? So what you would be diagnosed with ADHD really is a combination of that physiology and mental health issues. And 100% agree with you. If you tell somebody you've got a disorder, there's no cure for it, you're never going to get better, you have to take this medication, you'll just buy into that. Like, you've got a healthcare professional, an expert, saying you've got this disorder, this disease, this thing wrong with you. So you're going to accept it. And it's interesting, the people I work with, those who get a young diagnosis versus those who get an old diagnosis, the behaviors are very different. And I've worked with people in the same family where that's happened. The younger brother's had diagnoses, fallen into the victim of it. He's kind of got perceived special treatment from the elder sister who got diagnosed as an adult. And that created lots of trauma in itself. The younger brother always had that victim mindset. The elder sister was very, very determined. She achieved some great things in her career, but suffered a lot of mental health issues for different reasons, both of them. But essentially ADHD is a different operating system. So ostensibly, in your typical mind, you could refer to that as a farming mindset. So it's all about, diligently working to our goals, diligently doing things for the longer term goal, right? Longer term gains, small incremental steps to move forward, putting, repeatable effort in. ADHD mind is a hunter-gatherer mind. So it's about acting when it feels right, when it feels ready, when the opportunities are there. It's being hyper-vigilant. It's being empathetic and sensitive. If you're hunting for your village, if you weren't empathetic and sensitive, you wouldn't bother. You just do it for yourself, right? And so we were wired for interest, intrigue, fascination. Hyper-focus to when something feels ready, when the time is right, we'll really focus and hyper-focus on that. So it's a great book by a guy called Tom Hartman. He's an American psychologist. I think he's a TV presenter of some sorts now, actually. But he wrote a book called ADHD, Hunter in a Farmer's World. That's a fantastic book to start with. If you think you're ADHD or you're ADHD, or you find that your kids are ADHD, that will really explain the physiology, and it goes into some of the mental health issues around that as well. Now, on the trauma side of things, so the world is designed for farmers, right? The school system is designed for farmers. So they're small, incremental, diligently working towards our goals. So basically, the environments we've been put in from a young age do not suit us. So in the school environment, your learning style is assumed to be read, rhyme, regurgitate. If you're ADHD, you'd be kinesthetic learning. You learn through doing, learn through experience. So there's already that mismatch, that resistance. And so every day in the school environment, you're being told you're not good enough, you're not sitting still, you're not paying attention, you're too sensitive, you're too emotional, you're not getting it, you're not understanding it. So that persistent negative feedback just accumulates to build the belief system. So a lot of people with ADHD suffer from what the mainstream will call rejection sensitivity dysphoria, RSD. Again, it's a fancy name for essentially a massive fear of rejection that comes from this persistent negative feedback experience. So there was a guy, I forgot his name now, actually, a few years ago, a psychologist did a study to work out that on a daily basis, somebody who's neurodiverse getting such a persistent negative feedback that by the age of 10, they'll have had 20,000 more negative feedback experiences than their neurotypical counterparts. Just that constant daily feedback. And there's Dr. Lasada, I've forgotten the first name, I think it's a she, created what was called the Lasada ratio. So how many negative to positive feedback experiences you need in any situation. So typically, it averages out kind of 4 to 6 to 1. I think if you're ADHD, it'd be in the negative, right? Interestingly, there's an upper limit to these feedback experiences as well. So if you get too much positive feedback, then you're going to not trust it because you think, no, it can't be right. But that's what creates a lot of the things we struggle with being ADHD. And then you couple that with the kind of experiences that we have in childhood that create trauma. It could be parents having their own issues, their own anxieties, their own fears, arguing all the time, parents splitting up, illnesses and families, injuries, the really difficult abuse that some people have, the negative experiences in their areas of lives. You're already 10 steps ahead of everybody else. So, it's just pouring more petrol on that fire. So typically we're going to get to that point of struggling with stress, anxiety, depression, those kind of things before anybody else does. And because of all those negative feedback experiences, typically people with ADHD are massive people pleasers. Imposter syndrome was a huge part of that. That was a massive part of my experience. So for me, I was always thinking everybody else was a bit better than me. Got to work hard and longer, do everything everybody asked me to do because of that fear that I had to keep making up this perceived gap. Don't get me wrong, that helped me push myself to a really high level in my own career, but it was killing me at the same time because I just felt like I could never keep up with these expectations I was setting myself. Low self-worth, the constant fear of rejection was just building and building and building and building. So we're getting these fears, we're getting pushed up. And eventually, you're going to go over that tipping point for stress and anxiety, really start to notice the anxiety, the stress, the depression, sleep issues, panic attacks, coping mechanisms come in. And if that makes you feel better in that, that short period of emotional distress, the subconscious will latch onto, you reference like going to the pub with your mates. Alcohol is like a magic pill, it just makes everything go away for a short period of time. So most of the world are self-medicating with alcohol on a regular basis, but it's just on weekends to switch everything off and relax and wind down, or on a daily basis for a lot of people. Drugs, same thing. It's just an escape from reality. It could be sex, it could be shopping, it could be, in my case, exercise. So again, those endorphins you get from exercise are just like a magic pill. But like any addiction, like the more the stress, the anxiety, the negative experiences build, the more you need of your coping mechanism to counteract it. So, for me, marathons, triathlon, that was my way of coping, but I was putting such physical stress on my body. I was constantly getting ill with viruses, flu, injuring myself, because you just put too much stress in my body, and then you lose your coping mechanism. And of course, then all the stress and anxiety gets even worse. So just going through cycles of this constantly was my challenge. And to be fair, I was binge drinking on the weekend, and my original coping mechanism when I was younger was food, comfort eating. Triathlon meant I could eat more. I wouldn't have admitted it at the time, but equally, the excessive exercise was down to my low self-worth. So my brother was really sporty growing up. He could do anything fantastically first time he tried it. That was how he connected with my dad. I was a younger older brother, didn't really have that relationship. So it was a way for me to stick two fingers up to my older brother, but try and get my dad's attention at the same time. So again, multi-layered these experiences. And again, going through the root cause therapy with hypnosis just helps unravel all of this stuff. So it's like having a box of tango cables. Like two fears get triggered in the same environment, creates a new stronger fear. So you've got all this low self-worth, rejection, sensitivity from ADHD, and then that's coupled with other experiences you get growing up, family issues, falling out with siblings or whatever else. So you pull the big cable you want, and there's 7 other cables hanging off it. So, you need to pick them apart first. So what most people experience with ADHD is that you get the diagnosis, and suddenly you're kind of like, right, that's the answer to all my issues. That's the thing. I'll go on the medication, and that will solve everything. Of course, it doesn't, because you've got all this trauma you've experienced just because of your neurodiversity. But then everybody has all these other emotional traumas that build up. You can't get out of teenage years without this stuff that's accumulated through all of your life up to that point. And the trouble with the NHS is it's all based on care pathways. So when you're on one care pathway, when you have a diagnosis, that's it. You're on that pathway, and they don't cross over. The systems won't allow it physically. The software systems won't allow it, let alone the processes. But so there's a lot of people with ADHD out there that are just left out at sea. And when you look at the diagnosis criteria for mental health issues, whether that's borderline personality disorder, manic depression, bipolar, there's huge overlap. And really, it's just a collection of mental health symptoms that they've labeled. And so there's a lot of people out there that get diagnosed with one of these mental health conditions who are actually underneath ADHD as well. Again, it's not spotted because they've been labeled BPD or bipolar or something else. But it's all the same root cause problem. At some point, your subconscious felt unsafe and it created a fear and a reaction to protect you. Or it's the inherited negative belief systems that we're given in society or from family. Doesn't matter what label we put on it, same process. PTSD, again, same process. It's a simple process that just creates this complex mess behind it, essentially. So, and with ADHD, because you're in the wrong environment, and because the things they celebrate in the school environment, university, college environments, are not aligned to the skills and abilities you have, you're just left thinking you're not worthy. You've been measured to somebody else's measures of success that don't suit you. And ironically, the things that you were great at being ADHD are more applicable to the real world than the academic skills are, right? Nice you can become a teacher, scientist, those kind of things. But being ADHD, we're incredible problem solvers. We see everything from different perspectives. We've got fast context switching minds. We can work through different permutations and solutions very, very quickly. And we're creative thinkers. So, I used to stress a lot about procrastination, right? We associate this with ADHD a lot. But procrastination is not a negative thing. When you remove the fears that create procrastination, it could be fear of failure, fear of rejection. Procrastination is just your subconscious mind saying, right, you need to take a step back to allow your mind to clear, to allow the creative flow to come back again. So if you give a neurotypical person and an ADHD person a task to do in 4 weeks to do it, the neurotypical person, the farmer, will just methodically work through that at the point of being given the task until they get to the end point. And they'll have plenty of time to get it reviewed and get it peer reviewed, whatever else. The creative thinker, the ADHD brain, won't. They'll wait for inspiration to hit. They'll think about it every now and again. They might try and do a little thing. They might, stop and start a little bit. But because they waited and allowed inspiration to hit, typically their solution would be better than the neurotypical counterpart because they didn't just dive in straight away. If that makes sense. So when I found out I was ADHD, I looked back at all these different experiences in my life and thought, that all makes sense. It's like my life flashed before my eyes, all the way down to like my first week of school, when I got put in detention because I misunderstood an instruction twice. But essentially, I realized, well, if leaving things to the last minute has always worked for me, and I've always succeeded, I've always done things on time, then why do we need to get stressed about that? I just allow myself to work with my mind rather than against it. And I used to get a lot of stress in my whole career because of that, thinking, I need to get this done, I need to start it, I need to start making progress. And then after the event, I'll do the thing and it'd be a good standard. Afterwards, I'll think, oh, God, Chris, if you did that 3 weeks ago, it'd be much better, it'd be less stress. Don't get stressed now. I've got a wellbeing event I'm doing this weekend. I've got 2 talks. Usually we have about 80 people in the room in these talks. I'm still writing a presentation now. One of them I'll probably finish off on Saturday night. But the reason why I can do it very quickly is because I've been thinking about it for 4 weeks. So it's just been mulling it over, sat in my subconscious, been making little notes about what I'll talk about, what I'll do. And so I don't stress about it, I'm not worried about it. It'll all kind of come together in the moment.
I think underscoring all of this, regardless of ADHD or anything, it's just about understanding ourselves.
Yes, yeah, and that's 100% agree. I mean, a lot of people will say, well, we're all on the spectrum somewhere. 100%. I mean, careful what you say in that context, because people on the extremities of that spectrum, that palette of behaviours, obviously minimising their experience, but everybody is uniquely different. You never get two people the same in the world, right? We're all uniquely different in some way. Even identical twins are uniquely different, both in presentation and how their minds work. But really, for anybody, it's understanding yourself, understanding how your mind works, understanding the right environment that suits you. So, the coaching clients I work with, whether it's business coaching or personal coaching, the first thing we do is, okay, what are the things in life you love? What are the things you hate? And we work through that. What did you love in all the jobs you've had? What are the things you hated in all the jobs you've had? What are all the things you love in life? And that starts to build this picture then of the right environments for them. And it helps us work out then how they start to move forward, whether it's in the business or finding a new job or whatever it is that they want to create. And neurodiversity, we're just experiencing that a little bit more extremely because our minds work so different to what is perceived to be the norm in society. And predominantly the education system is the biggest culprit with that.
Yeah, it's something that sort of plays on my mind because I like you, I was in the corporate world, and I never felt like I quite fitted in. There was always a comparison thing, and I'm not trying to unpick everything in my life and question everything, because that's one, boring. But I think I am on this journey of understanding who I am and maybe why I am. I think that's useful for me. And I think you've mentioned about falling into victimhood, just sort of blaming circumstances, etc. Obviously, that's not useful. But I genuinely believe, and I don't know why you can shoot me down, most people are in the wrong job. That would be the type of job, the career that they've chosen, etc. But when it comes to jobs, most of the time, we all think, it was a strategic decision. Most of the time it was, shit, I need some money. I said this before once. I remember when, so I left school, I did my A-levels and I failed them horribly. And I wanted to get a job. At the time, the way it was like, well, I lived nearish London. I could travel in. I was like, right, I'll just apply for jobs. And you had to write all these covering letters and everything and apply. And it's quite a horrible process when you go, well, I'm a good person, I'm going to apply for this job. And then you have to come up with some bullshit reason why you want to work for that company. And the result is, I just want some money. I've got no idea what I'm doing. Just hire me and we'll figure it out together. But and then when you enter into that world, you go, okay, and then I start to earn money and I'm just going to carry on down that line. Opportunities will present themselves or not. Maybe you'll move, but you kind of spend a lot of your time almost in this vacuum of, okay, I'm just going to try and find a career. And then oftentimes you'll get somewhere and it'll be frustrating. So you move somewhere else and you kind of go, okay, and then you move. But within that, there's often a lot of clues, a lot of signals of things that aren't quite right. The type of environment you like, the way that you like to work, the people you want to work with, the style. But we don't. So when you were actually talking, and I've said this before, when we were in school, we had a careers advisor, and it was very basic at the time. It was this, I don't even know the software, but it was just answer these 10 questions. And the results were, I think they had 4 answers. You are suited to a job outside in nature. You are suited to an office job. And so you go, oh, right, okay, so that's that's that. And you go, okay. But I was thinking, how wonderful would it be? And obviously you're doing it through the work with the people, like building up the picture of who they are, why they are, how they are, all of this. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
I don't believe the world of career coaching really considers that too much. It's more just sort of questions. Now, the thing is, if I don't have access to my subconscious, I know we do, if we can get there. But someone like you can go into my brain and kind of have a little rattle around and go, okay, look, this is something, etc. And you go, oh, okay, what an amazing gift. Because you can go, yeah, that's what you think, but it's not. It's because of this, this, and this. And you go, oh, and then you can start to shape your life. You can shape your work, which, people go, oh, work and life, work's just about money. Okay, fine if you do that. But I genuinely believe that you spend so much time in work that you really want to try and formulate something that really works for you, because when it works for you, it's going to work for the company. You're going to bring much different results than if you're stuck in this thing and just sort of, we say hamster wheel, but I think that's just because people think about it like 9 to 5. But what an amazing gift to have that sort of understanding of yourself, understanding of, okay, well, that was the situation. That's how my brain just thought about it. But under there is like some layers of stuff. And then you start to understand yourself and you go, oh yeah, I should not be going that path. I should be doing this. And what a wonderful gift to give people.
100%. 100%. I was just touching on the career selection stuff. Like, who at 15, 16 knows what they want to do in life, right? Not many. I mean, for me, people would say, and this is in the mid-late 80s, oh, Chris, computers is where the money is. You need to go into computers. And I was like, yeah, I like computers. I like money. I'll do that. And just got this one-track mind that, of course, GCSE computer science A-level, computer science degree. And even like my mid-late 20s, I started thinking, my time again, I wouldn't do this. I'd go into psychology, psychotherapy, or marketing, something like that, with the things that were coming into my mind at that point. But I felt committed. I felt I was in this career. People will say to you, well, you've invested in that education, you've invested in this career. You can't quit. That's failure. You've got to stick with it now. You've got to keep going, and as much money as you can, save for retirement. And then, this is the promised land that we're all shown. It's actually the biggest cause of depression in this country, if you ask me. Because people lose the purpose. They don't know who they are anymore. They don't know what to do themselves. So, it took me until I was 45 to make that change. But you can do it at any point in your life. Being ADHD, we're multidisciplinarians. You love to try different stuff. The guy I worked with in my 20s, he worked in IT, he's been a director in an IT company. He's been a musician, he's been a personal trainer. He's done so much different stuff. He just allowed himself to go off and experiment, try. I've got a client. She's a veterinary surgeon now, but she started out life as a vet, and then she got so far and went, actually, I want to work with computers. I want to write software. She went, well, okay, I'm going to do that. Got so far in that, and I went, nah, I'm bored of that now. I want to go back and work with animals again. I'm going to train as a veterinary surgeon now. But beating herself up because getting a lot of negative feedback around that. But what's wrong with that? Who says that's wrong? This is our navigation system for life, right? So when you let go of all of the fears and any beliefs that will hold you back, then anxiety is just your body saying this environment, this person, this situation is not right for you. And when you feel love, joy, that excited nervous system, that's your body going, follow that, do that. That's where your passion is. And, subconsciously, our intuitive mind, we know what we need, we know what we want, but it's the fears, it's the belief system that stops us, it gets in the way. So, for a lot of the clients I work with, we go through the therapy process and suddenly they're just able to really move forward. I've had people change careers, have left difficult relations that don't serve a purpose anymore, they've moved different places, they've gone traveling the world, they've set their own businesses up, because they've let go of all of those fears that are holding back. And this is why when I train people, I'll make sure they all go through the therapy. Partly because we don't have any wounded healers out there, but I let go of any of the fears that you would have had of running your own business, essentially, so you can really succeed. But I'm a firm believer that if you are doing the thing that you are passionate about, you cannot fail because you have that passion. And what we learn in continuous improvement methodologies in the corporate world and the agile software development methodologies is, the things that go wrong serve as just as much purpose as the things that go right, because we learn, we evolve, we move forward from that. That's where the lessons are. And we grow more when things go wrong than they do go right. and we learn more. Most entrepreneurs you'll meet, they love failure. They just want to do it as soon as possible. And in software development, we fail fast, we learn quick. Formula One, British cycling, British rowing, they're essentially small margin businesses, but all of them are all about failing fast and learning quick, understanding what their measure of success is, understanding what good looks like, and then making sure that they work towards that. But we don't do that in our personal lives. Like, how many of us take a step back and go, what do I want my life to look like? Don't like my job. Don't like what I'm doing. How do I change that? What do I want to get to? What does good look like for me? But we can all do this. It's a simple process. I mean, I use mind maps for everything. Suits my mind, it's non-linear. And I'll just chuck ideas down. I'll just put thoughts down. Any new business idea I have, anything that I want to create in my life, it all starts in our imaginations. And as soon as you put it down on paper, you've got a goal. And as soon as you put a timeline against that goal, you've got a plan. And then basically we just work backwards from that plan. So what are the different transitional states, the different milestones I might need to go through to get from A to B? That could be learning something new. It could be I need to change to a different job so I can blend these two things I want to do together for a while before I can then go and do that full time. So some of the people I train have done that. They've found different types of jobs to do in between moving to the new careers. But yeah, it's only what's in here that stops us. The only difference between you and me and Richard Branson is the belief system. That's it. That's it.
I think, I spent a long time fantasizing about being, let's say, rich and successful. But, I've come to realize success is, I think understanding yourself is actually the biggest term of success for me. I think if you end your life understanding who you are and how you are, I think that's fantastic. I really genuinely believe that.
That's where the clues are for what will make you feel fulfilled. You understand yourself, you understand what you need, understand where your passions are, your joy is, then that is how you become successful. Like, there aren't many people that became successful by thinking, I want to be a millionaire or a billionaire. They had something they were passionate about that made them become that billionaire.
Yeah. And
what it is.
You've said quite a lot there, and my brain just keeps flashing up that about the environment. The school environment. I don't. It's such a big discussion, and I don't want to beat on teachers, etc. But the whole schooling system isn't designed for anything. It's there's loads of different thought processes behind it, but ultimately, you come out of either school thinking you're a success or a failure, and it's just and so that leads me to that point where, even in work, most of the time you're not told to make a mistake. That's not okay. There's a cost, or
there's a lot of stigma in the UK, particularly about that.
Yeah, there's a lot of
US, interestingly.
Yeah, I mean, I worked in the banks, and if there was never an error, oh God, you were dragged through the coals about it. It was like big error forms, etc. And absolutely understand, but there was a lot of finger pointing behind it. It was like it was almost like shame, and you're like, oh, but that basically stops you being who you want to be and trying these things and experimenting. And I've actually in my own life started with this idea of experimenting because I love the word. It makes me quite relaxed. I'm just going to experiment because I can do this for a short period of time. There's no pass or fail. There's just learning.
Yeah.
And at the end of that, it can be, okay, I'm a bit off on where I wanted to go. I just need to tweak this and this and this. Or you go, I gave myself a month and it doesn't really resonate or it doesn't work. But it's an experiment. But we don't have that in so many, I know in science and stuff like that, probably. But in most of the work, we just don't do that. In school, we're not. We're told, look, we know all the answers. We're going to teach you parrot fashion. This is how you. And I've said this so many times. I have learned so much about life since I've had kids because at some point I thought in the early naive stages that I would tell them what to do and they would do it. And then I realized they were actually mirroring my behavior. And I realized, okay, if I want them to change, then I need to change myself first. but they are so intelligent. They don't come with all these assumptions of life.
They
And
don't have all of these negative programs,
yeah,
that hold them back. They don't have judgment. They don't have racism. They don't have rejection. They don't have low self-worth. They're a blank canvas. I mean, somebody once said to me, like, kids are like rice paper. Every time you touch them, you affect it in some way. So, anybody who's got young kids who come to see me, they have a realization at some point to go, shit, I'm doing this to my kids now. I'm repeating the process my parents did with me. I would say, well, the key thing is you're here and you understand that now. And this is an evolutionary process. Your parents probably moved forward from their experience with theirs. But yeah, like you can get back to that childish bewilderment in life again. When you recognize the physiology of how your mind works, you recognize the physiology of stress and anxiety and where all this stuff comes from, suddenly you just look at the world in a different way. And when you realize that actually you are able to change your experience at any point in time, then you can just reframe your experience. And in all of the work that I do and my partner does, we always talk about getting back to that playful innocence, like just looking at everything as just play. You try a new job, you try a new pastime, you try a new way of doing something, you just see it as play. And when you recognize that you're going to learn more when stuff goes wrong, everything serves your benefit. So you're always going to move forward as long as you recognize the lessons and you make adjustments to whatever it is you're doing. You always find your way. And again, like I said earlier, if you're passionate about something, then you're just going to keep pushing, keep trying. But the school system was essentially designed to create productive, obedient factory workers, right? It's not changed in over 100 years. Little things change here and there, but having kids myself now, teenagers, ones at university, not a lot's changed really in reality. Particularly neurodiverse kids, there's better understanding in the school, but unfortunately, a little bit of knowledge is a dangerous thing sometimes, particularly if you're not neurodiverse yourself. There's some amazing SEN teachers out there who are neurodiverse and really make a difference. But yeah, it's a big behemoth kind of thing to try and change for the better. But there's pockets of things that are happening. There's schools that are doing things differently, so it is evolving. But you're 100% right. It's like the trouble with academia is that it's very much, this is the knowledge, this is right, and you can't question it. But the best scientists are the ones that say, actually, I don't believe that. I believe something different. I'm going to prove it. I'm going to hyper focus on it until I can. So all the best scientists are going to be neurodiverse, right? And all the greatest scientists of history now proven to be neurodiverse based on analysis of their work, analysis of what they've written. People like Einstein and Tesla. And in the same way, in any situation, the people who really succeed are the ones that say, no, I don't believe that. I believe something different. And I'm going to hyper focus on that, where it's science, entrepreneurship, creating new ways of working, ways of doing things, inventing new things. I believe it all comes from neurodiversity. You're going to be inventive being neurodiverse. Can you say, well, actually, I think you can do it differently. I'm going to hyper focus on this instead. But a lot of academics hide behind that knowledge. It's like, I'm a big fan of Graham Hancock, who challenges the history and the evolution of the world, basically just by saying, look, here's some evidence we need to look into. But then he's basically accused of being a lunatic by mainstream archaeologists. It's like, no, what I'm saying to you is, look, here's some evidence. I'm not saying I'm right or wrong. I'm saying this challenges the mainstream understanding. But he's vilified in those communities. And I think it's the same in anything, really. And I get the same thing, on TikTok. I talk about ADHD and I talk about my experience of it. I talk about the experience of my clients. I talk about the experiences going through that and the changes it creates for them and the things they do afterwards. But I'll get some psychologists and psychotherapists go, no, you're wrong, Chris. No, it's a disorder and it needs medicating. And I'm like, well, actually, here's some research actually that proves the opposite. Here's some literature you can read. Here's some other evidence. These are my case studies. And again, they're just no, you're wrong. No. And often they'll start picking me up on my spelling and grammar as the final kind of insult, really, because that's all I've got left.
Yeah.
But again, I'm just saying, well, look, here's a different concept. If it resonates with you, great. If it doesn't, that's fine.
Yeah.
Maybe not ready for this kind of type of viewpoint yet, but yeah, it's a social condition ultimately. It's a social condition.
It's amazing because when you look back, these people are now sort of revered and they say, oh yeah, they were game changers. But actually, if you look back and study at the time, they were seen as like crazy or lunatics or
Yeah,
something.
yeah.
So, but that's the thing is, and I always I have so when I grew up, I didn't really have a lot of opinions, and I looked around and everyone seemed to have an opinion about everything, and I thought there was something wrong with me. I was like, I just don't have an opinion about that. So now I've got a bit older, I have opinions, but I don't have opinions about that much stuff. But one of the things that I'm really okay with is having my opinion changed. And I often find that through these conversations because based on my 47 years on this planet, all my experiences and background have led me to this opinion. If someone presents me with something else, I'll go, oh, okay. And we feel that we can't change our opinion. That's our identity. And absolutely, we have to stick to that. But I think the world is so much better when I go, oh, I thought that. And then someone not challenge me. It doesn't need to be a conflict thing. You go, have you considered this? And you go, oh, but we would be so much further forward rather than just stuck in that way. We go, no, it has to be that way because if that's not true, then my life is worth nothing. And that's my identity all wrapped up in it.
Yeah, it happens in every area of our society, doesn't it? I mean, it classic in the workplace. Working in IT consultancy, you go to companies, you go into implement new processes and systems and technology, and you go, okay, well, tell me how you do things, and what's the reason it's done like that? Oh, we've always done it like that. That's the it was always the situation in those environments. But yeah, it happens everywhere. It's just like, this is what we know, and this is our belief system, and I'm going to stick to it. And most people don't like to be challenged on it. But I'm like you. I want to learn. I want to grow more. I want to understand more. I want to learn new ways of doing stuff. It's like, the therapy process I use, it was developed by a guy called John Howard in the early 90s. It was a career psychologist who recognized hypnosis was the real way to get permanent changes. But, I'll be the fourth person to take over this association. And each person has added something different, taken it further a little bit more, brought in a new way of thinking. And like, the world's very different to what it was in the 90s, even, right? We were teenagers. So, just on a basic sense of it was an 8-session process in the 90s. I've made it a 10-session process because the world is more complex now than it was then. We've got smartphones, we've got social media, we've got much more that's affecting our mindset and our psychology that I just found I needed more sessions for most people. So I extended it, I changed it, I added new things to it. So learning like the shamanic healing process and bringing some of that into this as well. So again, the world is an evolutionary process. We are in this part of this evolutionary process. Funnily enough, it was Harry Enfield actually who made a statement about this. It must have been the 90s when at university or something. He was being interviewed on daytime TV. He was talking about how he recognised he was starting to turn into his dad. I was like catching himself going, shit. He was talking about, recognise it has to be an evolutionary process. I have to move on from their experiences and their challenges. And that's stuck in my head, actually, weirdly, as a teenager, probably lying in bed watching daytime TV. And so, I think we should apply this to everything in our life. Whatever we came here to achieve as souls, I do believe that, it's all about growing and learning on a human basis and a soul basis as well. So, we just came to experience stuff. We came to learn and evolve. So, that it's the only way we're going to evolve is by learning new things.
Yeah, and not being
Both,
stuck.
for ourselves and, society and humans as a whole. We've
Yeah,
got to be open to change, open to things. And for some people, it's not until it smacks them in the face that they believe it.
yeah. I
But,
think
until somebody's got to do that research and believe something different to go, right, I want to explore that, to find that evidence to go, here you go.
yeah, yeah. I think I mean, one of the things that I'm conscious of time, we'll sort of wrap up in a second, but I think such a big part of our conversation today, with the ADHD, the hypnosis, everything is based around our environment, the environment we grew
Yeah.
up on, the
Yeah.
one that we're currently in. And they can have such a positive impact, but they can also have a negative one. And
Yeah.
it's understanding, like I said, understanding yourself, who you are, how you are, and then seeing if you fit in that environment, be it work, family,
Yeah.
friends, whatever, and just being able to explain it to other people. I think that is such a wonderful thing to do. And again, we sit that under the title often of therapy because, something's blown up in your world and you've had to go to therapy. The sad part is that actually I feel, we should try to understand ourselves from an earlier age, just as a natural progression of, okay, and not to give necessarily ourselves labels and put excuses in our way of, being the best versions of ourselves.
Yeah.
But just understanding, okay, well, this makes sense to me, because I think I truly believe there are so many people really frustrated with life. They have everything that deems success or seems right, but things aren't just landing. And it's that. And I think it comes down to understanding who they are and where they sit with everything. So thank you very much for sharing all of the ADHD stuff. That really sort of starts to build a foundation in my mind. And I think it's so useful. And the analogy that you gave of, when you pull out like a load of wires out of a box and it's just, it comes with other stuff. That really sticks with me because, sometimes we go, I pull out one cable and there's one end, but no, there's loads of different ends and you can't, and that can be such a fun thing to find out. It doesn't need to be frustrating. It can be exciting.
Yeah.
And people like you who create this in such a caring way find modalities to help people do that, find out who they are. Obviously, I guess a lot of people come to you with trauma. Is that really the sort of trigger why people come to see you first?
So obviously I deal with everything from the extremity of trauma, PTSD, complex PTSD, but a lot of people are just stuck and feel unfulfilled, depressed, anxious, and just feel like there's something more I want to do, something else I need to do. I just can't get out of this rut. All the way down to teenagers with self-confidence, self-image issues. Like we talked about earlier, it doesn't matter relatively how much you've experienced, good or bad. It doesn't mean you don't deserve to find the right solution to resolve these issues and find that ultimately the thing that makes you feel fulfilled. Get on the right path that suits you and create a life that suits you and your family.
Yeah. I think
one thing I will say, like before we wrap up, is that often people come and they perceive everybody else to be in a much better place than they are. They perceive everybody else to be okay, but that really isn't the reality. It really isn't the reality. Like most people out there are struggling with something. We're all trying to survive in the best way we can, ultimately, right? Even when somebody's not being very pleasant to you, that's their fears, that's their anxieties, their reactions. We don't know what they've experienced today. They might have had a massive fallout with a partner this morning. That's why they've been really negative with us, right, in the office or whatever it is. But we're all struggling with something somewhere.
Yeah, and I think that's a great thing to sort of end on. Just, I think we don't know what other people are struggling with, so just create that pause before we react. Because and I just to add on to that, I think social media heightens that because people are trying to pretend that they've got the perfect world, and then we compare, etc. The reality is if they had the perfect world, they wouldn't necessarily need to show that to everybody else. So it's
Exactly.
kind of, yeah.
There'll be no benefit in doing that.
Yeah, exactly. So, but again, it's being conscious of what things are actually at play and how that affects us. But for today, Chris, this was amazing. You've helped me enter into that world of understanding ADHD a little bit, and that's a great thing for my journey and my progress. So, in terms of people wanting to find you, is there a website? I found you on LinkedIn, like I find all my guests. Where's the best place people find you?
So my company is called Develop Link. So you can find Develop Link on Instagram, on TikTok, on LinkedIn, Facebook. www.developlink.com is my website. If anybody is interested in finding out more about how I work or interested in working with me, then you can book a consultation via my website or just drop me a message and we can have a chat.
Brilliant. Fantastic. Well, for today, as I said, it's been amazing. I really appreciate you giving me your time. And
Welcome. It's been a pleasure. It's been fun. Thanks, Colin.
Take care, Chris. Bye. It's me again. So just a quick ask at the end of this video. So my plan is to grow this channel, to have more conversations, to get more interesting guests, to have live, genuine conversations. Now, if you're a follower of YouTube, all the channels say the same thing, and I'm going to have to do it. If you like it, please subscribe and hit the bell notifications. It's quite easy, but it just gives me some feedback to understand what you like and allows me to bring those conversations to you. So I'd really appreciate it. It's pretty quick, pretty simple to do. If you've got any comments, let me know as well. You know, if there's questions you think I should have asked, I'm open to feedback, constructive, of course. But let me know. And yeah, I really appreciate your support.